All right. Hey everyone. Today I'm going to be doing another market update with my positions. As you know, I had MSTZ. If you watched my last video, I kind of determined that it wasn't a good name to trade. Um, just given where the market's at and where MSTZ was, I kind of realized like, okay, this breakout probably doesn't have good expected value given the market's positioning. And that ended up being correct. The breakout failed, which is fine. You know, it was very low risk. But as far as low threshold breakouts go, like if you take them at random, the expected value is fine, you know? But we're basically here, and the market is going to be in a similar position, like not breaking down at all. So, yeah, if at the time market wasn't really breaking down. So if we take a look at that position, stopped me out. I also took a position in GDXD, and that was here. And positionally, this thing makes a lot more sense given the market context. My entry was on this day at the closing price. I put a limit order there and got filled. And basically, if you take a look at this chart and you compare it to things like IWM, and you compare it to on this day and Nasdaq on this day, you know, the things that you would expect to move the most if you watch my last video are not the like leaders to the downside here. It's going to be stuff that's just starting to make their initial legs. So if you have bearish situational awareness, now is a good time to not necessarily short, like, even though IONZ is extended, a good example of something that won't work is MSTZ, for example, because it's literally a leader right now. What's going to start working the best is going to be things like GDXD, because it's just breaking out of a long-term range, and the whole market is just breaking out of a long-term range right here. So things like GDXD, we can look at the other breakdowns from today to give you an example of what's working, but primarily the best short was GDXD. After getting stopped out in MSTZ, I day traded today, and now my day trading process had me watching these 10 stocks here. And today was a day to fade. So if you look at like how the market's open today, everything gapped up pretty big, but it's not like some crazy gap where the whole market's moving. Like we're literally just in a range. So in an environment like this, you generally just expect the open range break to fade. You know, it's not going to work on average. It today it did, I would say, you know, but it was also pretty choppy. Like if you had shorted here and then if you had longed, I guess here, I guess you would have made money, but it certainly wasn't easy, right? Like it was very choppy intraday. So expecting open range breaks to fail was my situational awareness going into today. Um, and it ultimately worked. But I'll show you my trades because you can see exactly what worked best from the stuff with the most RVOL today in my liquid universe. So here's the 15 minutes charts, which is what I was trading. Now my trade happened here because most of my watch list went green right here. So we had things like NBIS, AXTI, NFLX was an option, and so on and so forth. Now, if you were coming into today and you were like, which of these is like the best fade, right? You kind of want something that looks a bit like this. Um, I would, challenge you to try to guess right here. One option is something like BE. And so I was looking at it and I was really looking at it. Um, and I decided to pass because this is just like a perma downtrend. And if you think about where the market's at, like 200 on BE is a level. So we can zoom out all the way, and there's essentially a gap here that could be held at exactly 200. You can see I drew that line. But this thing was selling off kind of way too much for me to expect it to be choppy. Like this looked like something that actually has a problem with the stock. It's not like a leader, right? It's literally just like trending down for a very long period of time. So, like if you had the option between buying a stock that had half of its days that was like sort of like kind of in an uptrend or a down, this is in a really bad downtrend, and it's like it just didn't seem right at the moment. So, um, I passed on this fade, and you can see it didn't work, and I'm really glad I did pass on it. And then if we kind of go through the list, what you'll see is the things that were taking out the pre-market price action, and were like probably gonna fade were things like I had SNDK at this. Oh my god, Jesus Christ! Right here, I was like, okay, maybe SNDK will work, but SNDK had a problem where it was still inside its pre-market's range, and then for fading, remember, because that was my situational awareness, we had things like not PayPal, but kind of PayPal, right? Like I could see PayPal bouncing to the high of day here. It ultimately did. But it's outside of its pre-market, which is good, you know. And then we have things like Netflix. And again, like I could see Netflix bouncing to 69 here. It never does. We have Iron, and Iron wasn't fading. Like it was red here and it didn't go green for quite a while. Ultimately, that was the nicest one of the day. But the one I took, AXTI was red, and then the one I took here was NBIS. So NBIS, if you kind of look at it, was challenging the prior day's range. You know, it took out the pre-market highs, fell back in, and then it basically bounced off the prior day's close, which was essentially 180. You know, and then I bought it. And that was the thing I bought. And I noticed like, okay, SNDK is kind of doing the same thing, but SNDK is worse. So I just did MBIS, and this is what it did. You can see how it kind of played out. And so for me, what I did was I bought it on this candle. And then once it came back to my entry here, I got out at break even exactly, like literally lost $0.00 on this thing, because it wasn't worth it to. If you look at the whole market at the time when I got out, it just didn't look like a safe market. So I ended up getting my capital back. And at the time, I just kind of ran through my scans. And I've been really trying to be aware of like, okay, what is IWM? What is NASDAQ? What are SPY all doing? So I went into my tab, as I usually do, and I just kind of looked at all of them. So if you look at like SQQQ here, I don't know how to describe it, but this is like kind of a buy. And if I put it on the 2 hour, you'll really see it. It's a breakout right here. We have a breakout. And so the market has been strong, right? We're not in like an extended bearish period. You're going to want things breaking out of long-term bases at this point. Those are what's going to move the best. And that's what's been working. Like the best short of recent times was like IONZ on this entry here. I did take that. Maybe here I took it. But you see, like this breakout here was very good. And it's not like an extended thing. It's just starting its move. Like we're just starting to pull back here. So IONZ was really good. RGTZ on the same context where you have this flat base breaking out. That's how its move started. So something like SQQQ on the 2 hour, you can see like this is a good period. This is a good setup. Everyone would agree this is like a reasonable breakout here. And so what I did was I looked at SQQQ, I looked at TZA, and you can see it all. Like it's very, to me, these are like very obvious breakouts, and it's going as a group. So we have SQQQ, we have TZA, we have SPXS. And so this is the whole market, right? And so what I did was I did UVIX because I'm pretty aggressive, but you can see the UVIX is always in a perma downtrend, right? But if you just like put maybe UVXY will be less or SVIX, you can kind of see how like it's starting to break down through here is kind of what I'm thinking. So we're coming out at this base and the whole market is doing the exact same thing. So at this point in time, I want to be taking breakouts that look like UVIX or SPXS. You know, like SPXS and SQQQ and TZA, they all look very good as breakouts. So I just went with the stuff that I thought would move the most given the market context. And that ends up being UVIX. And then I also felt like, well, I already have a position in GDXD. But I think this is an entry. You know, if you consider the whole market, I'll just remove my lines. it, it's very clearly breaking out, after a tight range. So obviously there's like it's end of day and all that, but if you think about where the whole market is, um, this all happened at the same time. So there's a general move in this direction. So that's what I did. Those are my trades. I want to show you my situational awareness monitor. And this is what we have. So today was not like a huge day in terms of 4% breakouts. When we look at the overall indices, we end up getting a picture that like these things didn't close below the prior day's ranges or anything like that, but things are closing very weak. And it's very clear. So if you think about yesterday, markets gapped down way too much on this day here. There was almost always, like 70% of the time going to be a bounce. It's almost like a mistake. So even though I didn't consider, like, my situational awareness was not to trade the open range break today. It was this marker isn't red. It's considered an inside day. If you make the judgment call that this is a very rare, exceptional gap down day, uh, and just ignore this day, we're breaking down very clearly. It's the same picture here, right? If you're aware that this is a crazy gap down, you know, of 1% on SPY, on NASDAQ, it was huge. 2% is huge. And then on like Soxel, for example, literally gap down 12%, that's 4% on semis. It's hard to really take that day seriously. It just seems like anomalous. The market is probably going to ignore it, kind of like a day like this, where it's ridiculously big. You know what I mean? So every once in a while, price action like that happens, and it's just because I've done this for a while that I'm gonna make an exception to the judgment call. I'm trying to give another example. It's kinda, you'll see it with breakdowns, right? So like here, bounces, but this bounces before critical news and then news comes out. I don't really. There are examples. You'll see exactly what I mean. Sometimes on just ridiculous days, uh, price action will not count. Essentially, usually it's on massive, like monster gaps. So like a day like this, for example, is it's ridiculous, right? This is crazy gap. Uh, IWM down 3% in a day. It's just insanity, right? Um, the overwhelming probability is that all of this price action doesn't matter anymore in a situation like this. The whole market becomes very in play, and you almost all you got to do is draw a line at the high and the low, and then trade the direction that shows up, right? And that's essentially what happens. And it's the same thing here, when this like insane gap, when these insane gaps happen, the gap becomes more relevant. Now, you could have used my framework too, but this is like anomalous price action, very rarely happens, and you have to approach it differently than like, um, you know, a day like this, which, could very well be a data short, even though it isn't a data short, the situation changes, but the point still stands. So, yeah, at this point in time, if we look at the inverse ETFs, we have TZA. It's very clearly going up. If we have SQQQ, the market's very clearly picking a direction. If we have GDXD, it's breaking out of a long-term base, and so those are my trades basically. Now we have more context to kind of provide to this analysis, and even though the 4% breakdowns are very low, this is choppy. So if you look, yesterday we had 39 stocks down 20% in the past week. Today we have 22. So that's not very good. But we've gone from 73 stocks down 33% in a month to 87. So things continue to essentially fall here. This is borderline a valid signal. Um, the overwhelming thing here is my read on the indices, but none of this really screams bullish. None of this really screams bearish. The only thing I would kind of say is like this number is approaching, you know, once this gets to like 130, 150, it's extended, but we are increasing. Like things have been falling over the past month, and finally it looks like indices are taking it out, are doing the same thing. So on a backdrop of declining breadth, we have breakouts in things like GDXD, we have breakouts in things like TZA, SQQQ, SPXS. All of these are starting to like actually make a move, and they're moving together. So off of tight ranges, if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. And then I just, I'll move the stop up and get out of things that like break even. But I just want to provide that context. Like, so for example, this is like an example of where's a good one? I just want to show you what I'm seeing here. Essentially, it's a breadth move, right? So if we look at SPXS in its current form, this is what it looks like, right? You're gonna get it. Sometimes it won't work, and shorting is always hard. And we have a lot of information that you won't see from this chart. But suppose you're like, I don't know. There's no chart that looks the same to me. Could that be similar? Let's look at SPXS at this period here, on this day here. Okay. We can look at SQQQ. They're starting to break down a bit. We look at TZA. I don't know if TZA is really broken out. The question is, do all three of them make a move tomorrow? And they don't, right? So you're getting context like that. We want confirmation from kind of all three assets. Here's an example. This is really good. This is literally what happened. This is the exact same chart that we've seen recently. So TZA is right here. We have SQQQ. SQQQ isn't a long, so there's not really a reason to go short unless there's SPXS. And again, I don't think so. But eventually there would be continuation setups that all make sense like going forward. So we will see what happens. To me, this looks very high quality. I think it has a lot of potential to be a really good entry to the short side. And the backdrop is the breadth situation. So I don't really know what else to say. It's just one trade, but it's hard. It's so hard to be bullish in this context. There's not really any reason to expect things to work to the long side. One of the things that really stuck out to me after watching Stockby was like, if you have what should have been a bounce and then things don't bounce, that's information that there's no buyers, right? So I really wonder, I'm like, where's the bounce? It was a 1 day thing and it didn't follow through. If you kind of look at bounces that worked, here's a 2 day bounce, immediately follow through the next day. Off of a pullback, I mean, that's not really a good bounce. We're looking for pullbacks to bounces. So you see, like in bearish environments, these bounces aren't very clean. And sure, they might bounce eventually, but it's a feature of bearish markets is when you get a bounce like this, it only lasts 2 days and it doesn't follow through amazingly. As opposed to this bounce here, which follows through very well and closes near the high. This is a lot stronger of a bounce, 4 days up. Same thing here, 1, 2, and then 3, closes near high, and then it works for a bit. In these bearish environments, it's just 1 day very often, right? And you might get setups like this, but the backdrop is this bounce didn't work, and so it really demonstrates that the only reason people bought it down here is because the market was ridiculously oversold. And then, it continues to be choppy and shorting continues to work and things like that. If you look here, for example, this is a 2 day bounce, right? And it follows through. So it's just one of the variables I'm watching. and I am aware of that context, as well as the fact that the market, the breadth, like this number of stocks down 33% keeps going up. Like things are joining the sell off, and here are just a few of them. So some of these bounced very well, but we want to see the whole indices bouncing. Like I want to see IWM going green today. It's not going green, it's going red. I want to see XPXL going green today and it's going red. I want to see Soxel having a big green day today, not a red day where we are near yesterday's close, right? This is a very good bounce. This is another good one. Like buying comes in, but the bounces are just getting weaker and weaker. So my my impression is that the market is weak. I have a lot of things vindicating that perspective, and so I just took, you know, shorts from good positions. Like if you look at what worked in my video a while ago, breakouts like this work really well when the market is turning. So I'll show you the context here with QQQ. So this is the day that a breakout from a bear flag worked very well. So you get the V-shaped recovery, you know, and then on this day here, breakouts from bear flags worked. And this is where they only worked. The only time they worked was, so IWM, obviously, SPY breaking out, QQQ, again, breaking out. And then this is like, obviously a bear flag. I can show you the opposite in case it's easier to see. But you know, imagine a big green candle in this direction. It would work. So when it breaks out this way, and the whole market continues to go higher, this thing works really well. And so my impression is if the whole market starts to fade, things like UVIX and SPXS and TECS, they're going to work really well because they're coming out of these like bear flags. They're obviously bullish flags because the underlying is bullish, but that's the idea there. And then if these things continue, like suppose I'm right and suppose the market kind of does something like this, you know, probably going to stop trading things like UVIX. I'll sell it at like 85 or wherever it goes to. And we will look for moves in things like MSTZ, basically. Because if this goes sideways while the whole market breaks down, all it will take is one homogeneous red day to get this thing going. And so I think what this will do is like consolidate up here because it's not selling off with the rest of the market, but it is weak, right? MSTR is very weak. So I suspect the broader market will sell off, and then it's just going to take a negative breadth thrust or a bounce and then a, you know what I mean? And that's kind of what I'm thinking is going to happen. So at the moment, you see I've got GDXD. There's ZSL for context. It looks pretty freaking good. And then we also have UVIX. And in typical fashion, I have half of my account in this thing, and the stop is like there. You know, so it's 2% risk per trade. It's okay. And then I have the stop active in after hours. There's no sense taking such a huge position in something so crazy with gap risk because it could gap to like here, and that would be really upsetting. So with GDXD, I don't really have that simply because it's a liquid. So sometimes the spread is crazy after hours. So that's where I'm at. Thanks for watching, and you know, it's kind of like one of those markets where we've got to take things almost day by day. Things will move homogeneously, you know. In really good markets, what we found was that you could get a breadth thrust. Like, so for example, here, I was looking at GME, okay? And I want to show you GME when it went crazy. Because like, how do you trade it, right? On this day here. What does the NASDAQ do? What does IWM do when GME does this? Here's IWM on January 21st. Okay, here's NASDAQ on January 21st. And then we have SPY. We have Bitcoin. Okay. Oh, shit, we don't have Bitcoin on here. We can use MSTR as a proxy. Okay. January. So here we are. And so on this day, when GME breaks out, it's not really the right day to buy it. but it's this day here that the move really starts, and then have a look at MSTR. So MSTR breaks out, so Bitcoin would have been breaking out, presumably. I'll just put coin up there. It doesn't exist. Jesus Christ. I'll put IWM. You see, big green day on IWM on this day, and then we have SPY. Not a big day. Then we have QQQ. So in like overwhelmingly bullish environments, you can get away with like quite a bit less confirmation. And I'll put these on the 2-day so you can see. So, and this is like a long-term trending market. So in our case, because we're shorting and we're here, I'm like, I want perfect confirmation. And that's what I got on the 2-hour. Like, all three major assets went. And then we have things like GLD is not going anywhere. Silver is breaking down. You can see it on ZSL breaking out upwards. Really good entry. Like buying it here would make a lot of sense. And so a lot of things are just breaking down at this moment. And that's kind of what I saw. If we look at breadth, broke down. There you go. Here are semis. Same thing in SOXs. SOXs looks like SQQQ, so I didn't really cover them, but that's what I see. I mean, it's one trade, but you want to be as accurate as you can. And on the backdrop of declining breadth, I took those trades. So we'll see what happens. Thanks for watching.